very good morning to Dev and Urmi. And Dev, as a lot of people know, is MD of Compass Group in India. And Urmi is a superconscious coach. And she has been training people in the corporate, in the leadership position for last many years. So today, the topic, what we want to discuss here is what are the challenges we are facing in the leadership roles, especially in context with in the last couple of years, the COVID situation, the lockdown, what challenges it has presented. And then we will explore what is the way forward. So I would first put this question to Dev because you are in the industry. So can you share what are the main challenges which you have faced as a leader?
Look, I think it's been pretty unprecedented, right, for all of us in several ways. In our personal lives, also, I guess, in very many dimensions and many spheres of life. But I think the biggest challenge for me was actually on the work front, right? I mean, of course, one was extremely concerned about, the health and well-being of your loved ones. And that, of course, was the number one concern. And during the wave two, obviously we were in a war mode, I think, all the time. But if you were to take some of that out and say that, yeah, that was really extreme in the last 1.5 years, over a sustained period, I think the challenge of the workplace, I think, has been a fairly dominant theme for me, and 2-3 different types of challenges, I think. One is your business challenges themselves, like with most in our industry and many industries like ours, who were impacted by this significantly with several, severely diminished revenues, for example. And, how do you respond to that, cost initiatives, etc. So one is the business side of it, and I guess it was really the first challenge was to accept that it's happening. When I think back in, March 2020, the first thing was to accept that it's happening. And that itself was a, internal journey to sort of accept it and at some level be okay with it. Because if you didn't do that, you probably won't respond, I think, So I just recall that being my first challenge, that I just wasn't, it's almost like frozen for a few days, and once the challenge of accepting it was overcome, then the challenge of, I think, doing something to immediately contain the very short-term impact that it had. One had to really, deal with that, and with a very objective and a clear sort of mind, take some really harsh decisions, which is very difficult to do in terms of its personal impact on you as a human being also. You have to deal with that. So I think that was stage 2, to like sort of, do some immediate firefighting and, do what it takes to, survive almost, right? And then the third challenge, and these are coming sequentially almost, right? And we are not talking years or months, we are talking weeks. And the third challenge, I think, once you sort of contained the flood and the fire a little bit, then the third challenge became really about, okay, so what do we do now? Where do we move forward from here? How do we bounce back from this in the medium term? How do we make the most of a crisis, as they say? Does this give us an opportunity to work on things that we haven't worked on before, that makes us stronger, build leaner, build some muscles and train some muscles that we didn't focus on before organizationally, as well as, maybe pivot the business to look at new opportunities that have emerged. So these are sort of the 3 phases in a way of how one reacted. Like when I look back on it, these were the 3 stages in a way of coping with something like that and moving on. So yeah, I mean, and once you thought that the third part started to become exciting, right? Because now you were doing new things and then wave 2 came again. So you went back to stage 1, again stage 2, and again stage 3. So it's, that's been the sort of journey for me over the last 18, 20 months. Yeah.
So very interesting, like you said, it started with an acceptance stage. At this point, Urmi, I would like to have some insights from you. You have been working with business leaders. So can you throw some light on what makes a person or a leader more accepting of things to be able to deal with them? You know, what are the qualities or how does one become more accepting?
Right. As in everything else, business and life included, 80% of our success is if we are psychologically of a certain bent of mind. And I do believe people who do rise to leadership positions have a certain mindset. And one of the key things is very, very high energy. If you don't have that kind of energy, you can easily, when faced with a challenge, slip into a depression. So how do you get very high energy? Business leaders or leaders in any field actually have a more positive mindset than others. Challenges don't easily throw you. You probably start to see excitement when challenge comes. Okay, now how do I overcome it? So it's interesting to go into the leadership mindset, that what makes a person successful.
Yeah.
And one of the key jobs of a leader, shall I say, is to be on the ball and to keep the flag flying in spite of challenges, especially during challenges. Now, when I say high energy, what is high energy individual and how do we become high energy individuals is actually a thought pattern. Yes, the way you think, the way your attitude is towards life, the way you never give up, and also being a meditation teacher, I will say that, a business leader has a lot of intuition. It's not only intellect. You have the capacity to go beyond the intellect into a certain knowing. And that kind of intuition, you need to be connected to yourself. Very esoteric. You can ask me, what does it mean to be connected to yourself?
Yes.
Actually, it means being connected to a certain source, which also gives you that energy. Should we say a universal source? And you are connected to that. And so you actually sense things before they come. You can anticipate what is going to happen. And therefore, you are more ready.
Right.
And you have a knowing which most people do not have. So you can see a bigger picture than most people. So these are the things, I think, which add to your high energy.
Yeah, that's right. And Dave, a follow-up question, like you defined what you did. I mean, you went into from acceptance to doing the firefighting to looking at the, what next and how do we change. And that you also said became very exciting. So most people, when they are faced with challenge, they can either get into a fight or a flight. Either they will not accept, they will start fighting the situation, or they will try to escape from this. But you as a leader, you took one step at a time. Even as you said, there were concerns for your personal life, for your loved ones, and for your employees, but still you kept your head high and you kept, pushing the limits. What enabled you to do these things? A lot of people find it very difficult. So what, would you define as what motivated you to take things one step at a time?
I mean, I think, first of all, externally, there's an external dimension to your question in terms of enablers.
Yeah.
And then there is an internal dimension to your question, like internally, where do you find the motivation? So I have been very lucky to sort of have a extremely supportive environment, organization around me. I mean, work for a great company, which is extremely caring, which is very people centric, right? They understand the value of people. So the amount of support that we got from, the organization, globally, in being able to do a lot of things for our people, that was immense, right? So these things also help, right? You can't do everything on your own. And the second, I think, and perhaps very, very important part of our response was the team and the culture that we have managed to build, the leadership team and the culture that we have managed to build. I believe very deeply in the value of vulnerability and authenticity in working with people, right? I think unless we expose our soft underbellies to people and allow them give them the permission to misuse, that power, I think true relationships don't get built, right? So, because when you see somebody who is, giving you so much space that you can hurt them, if you're not a person who wants to hurt people, there is an automatic responsibility you will have towards them, So I sort of have that relationship with the team that I work with, where we are, I like to engage in a manner that is not coming from a place of power. Of course, sometimes, there is a need to do that, but mostly the default state, as I say, is a state of trust and vulnerability and openness and transparency. Now, I think that really became, it all came together, I think. It became very useful because everyone just got aligned very quickly, because we had that level of understanding and trust that we were willing to go out of our way to help each other, help the business. A lot of personal sacrifices people made, at that time, to sort of, help with the, financial situation, etc., etc. So I think one is the external dimension. On the internal side, I think I really don't know. I mean, it's just, I think when you sign up for a job like this, it comes with a sense of responsibility, and it comes with that understanding that it's not just about you, and it's probably something much bigger than you. So I think there is a constant awareness of that, and there's a constant sense of responsibility towards, the organization. And I think responsibility, once accepted, gives you also, I think, no choice. It gives you a sense of clarity and purpose and direction and power also, that with this responsibility, you have the power to do. So I think probably some of that. And I think also, just to, overcoming anxiety, I think, was a big theme, right? Overcoming anxiety about the future of the organization, and sort of looking for, moments which gave you hope. I think those kind of things probably were giving me some internal energy. But broadly, I think it's the first. It's almost like you don't have a choice now, right? You are in this situation. Flighting is not an option because of the responsibility you've taken. And fight, yes, but fight in a way, in the three stages of the fight that I talked about, just break that down into, what you can do. But I must say, I mean, it's sounding very cool right now on the internal part, that, sounding almost like I had it figured out. But it was a challenge, I mean, and I think that's what probably life is, right? I mean, if you don't have those challenges, and if you don't have anxiety, and if you don't have stress, and if you don't have, inconvenient things in your life, then probably you're also not living in a lane, or not driving in a lane which you want to also be in, right? So I think the realization that these things come hand in hand. I can go and sit in Uttarakhand, like in that mountain which is there behind me, right? But will I then feel fulfilled in terms of growth and, achievement and intellectual development, etc.? No, I might not, like, unless I'm on a spiritual journey, maybe, right? On the journey on which I am, like, I think these things come with each other. I mean, if you have the responsibility, then you've got to do it, I think. So more than anything else, I think it was that, Ritu, to be.
Yeah. Urmi, a follow-up question to you on this. So, like he said, there are different enablers, internal enablers, which help a leader do what he does, like being vulnerable, being trusting, not always pushing his way down, but including everyone and trusting them enough that they will also do the right thing. So, how does a leader or a person develop these qualities?
Well, there is a very important thing which a leader needs to do in such a case is that of self-study. You have to be able to introspect. You have to be able to see what are your own weaknesses and strengths. So to be connected to yourself and to really try and understand yourself, and necessarily, I think, for leaders especially, as well as for everybody else, to do a considerable amount of self-work. If you are not growing as a person, as a mature individual, then it is very, very difficult to inspire others, right? Leading is not about bossing. It is about inspiring others. So you have to be a certain kind of a person that actually draws out people's loyalties. People want to be like you. People follow your lead. So that doesn't come with force, right? That doesn't come with authority.
Right.
The difference between being authoritative and being a leader is very, very big.
Yeah.
A leader will actually draw that out of follower, or should we say, somebody, and a leader is also trying to build other leaders. That is a very major task at hand for the leader. So unless the leader is growing himself or herself, very difficult to help others grow.
Yeah. And another question to Dev on this, like because of this pandemic, especially, of course, always there has been, Dev, you're around?
I'm here.
Yeah. So anyways, there has been talk around emotional quotient or, building the resilience of people, especially during the pandemic. Do you think that was one important skill needed by people, or it needed to be developed to be able to take up this kind of challenge, which is no one knew about it, it just came in? So how much do you think that resilience has helped, and how much you think it will be needed in times to come?
In the sense, what could a leader have done to help people cope with what's going on in their lives? And is that what? Okay. Yeah. So I think if you think about what people were going through at that point of time, it was a sense of helplessness also, right? Because there is it almost became like everyone for themselves for some time, right? So I think just saying, even if you can't really do anything, at that point of time, one couldn't have really done anything material to help people. But just putting a message out there saying that, look, don't think that you are alone. To be able to say that when you have nothing to give, right? It requires a certain kind of, I think, courage, because you have nothing to give, but yet you are saying, call me if I can do something, I'll try to do it for you. So most people, I think, struggle with that, because it's like, oh, but when they call me, I won't be able to help them. So how can I say I'll help you, So I think organizations that, or people or leaders, anybody, individuals who cross that, I think that bridge of, almost hesitation, right? To do that, I think what they told other people is, look, there is somebody who can help me. There is an organization that I can fall back on, right? Because 99% of the people were not infected, but they had anxiety, they weren't able to cope. So at least you fixed 99% of the problem, right? And the 1% that were actually, needing support and needing in some cases, then you actually did get them the support and did try to help them as well. So there is a physicality to the support also. Don't get me wrong. It's not just about saying that I will do something and you don't plan anything. So you plan to the best of your ability. You do whatever you can to people. But it's easier to be resilient when you know you're not alone in the journey. You know that there's a backup vehicle which is coming around. If you fall, they'll pick you up. You know that, there is somebody to get your back. Then you can be resilient.
Yeah.
If you have the support system, you can be even more resilient. And I think a leader can provide that external support to people that they need to become internally resilient.
Interesting. And who provides that support to the leader? Is it his own mindset to start off with and then?
No, I think it has to be both external and internal. The idea that a leader will support everyone and he will not get support from others is also, I think, a flawed idea.
Yeah.
Because like Urmi was talking about, a leader is just another human being. He happens to be in that job. Oh, sure, he'll have some qualities and some people will be better leaders and some people will not be cut out for it. Of course, that separation will be there. But it's not a black and white in my view, right? It's just a gradient, right? And everybody has some leadership qualities and everybody has some challenges. So I think the style of leadership, we talked about this earlier actually, of authenticity, of vulnerability, that style of leadership is very helpful when you need support. Because people don't see you as a knight in shining armor who will come and solve all the problems. They just see you as a guy with some qualities and a good guy maybe, and somebody they look up to and are inspired by, sure, but not beyond that. They don't think of you as larger than life. They don't think of you as invincible. Yeah. And therefore, when you need support, there will be a lot of people standing there to give you that support, to lead you, to coach you, to talk with you. I think this reverse coaching idea is a very, very interesting idea. Leaders are ashamed of sometimes saying that they can get coached from their subordinates, right? But if they just acknowledge that everyone has got a brain and everyone has some life experiences that might be helpful, and that they might need that help, that they need that help actually all the time, and build a team like that. So I never had this problem of not receiving support from others. Everyone was calling me all the time and saying, are you okay? Are you okay? I think you were looking very stressed the other day. Can I help out? Can I do something? And, so I had support all the time from people around me, above me, below me in the workplace. Yeah.
That's interesting. So Urmi, would you like to add to this? How can a leader become more receptive to support and more receptive to inputs from people around them?
Yeah, that's a tough one, actually, to be able to be vulnerable enough to take a 360-degree feedback about how I am doing as a leader. Most people would run from that and hide behind, their huge desks and huge corner offices. But yes, it does take courage. And of course, one of the hallmark qualities of a person who is a leader is that kind of courage. That to be able to be open.
But why is it so difficult, Urmi? What comes in the way why do people make such a big deal about it?
I think what comes in the way is a lot of ego. And, and the false sense of, this is the difference between being a boss and a leader. And a false sense of grandiosity that, I am the leader, so I have to be seen in a certain way.
Is it also the fault of our society and corporate culture that image has been built that everyone looks up to as the ideal image? And maybe they are vulnerable as people and they want to be like that, but they are just playing up to an idea of leadership that is established out in the world. Is that also a major issue and more than ego?
In a way, yes, because people want to drop their responsibility and dump it on somebody else. So it's very easy to put somebody on a pedestal and say, okay, this person will look after me. Right? Now, the moment that person on a pedestal starts showing clay feet, then everybody down the line, it happens, right? People like to put the responsibility on somebody else. that I
we
don't
want to
need
be
do
led.
anything. Yes,
We
they
want to be
want
led also.
That is also natural human quality, shall I say. Many people, they just want to be led. Now, please tell me what to do. Don't ask me to decide. So that is also a leader's job, to coach people to speak up. It's a culture that, you know, even from school, you're not, if you talk too much in class or you start questioning the teacher, you're slapped down. You're seen as a rebel.
This is a very interesting dichotomy if you think about it. People want to be led, right? And therefore leaders start to lead, literally like lead. Yeah. And that's a model of leader and follower relationship which is established in the world. That relationship exists. Yet we are saying that in today's world, leaders who are leading literally are not the best leaders, and leaders who are more collaborative and nurturing are the right kind of leaders. So there is a dichotomy, isn't it? I mean, if that people want to be led as a reality, then this kind of leader will be seen as weak and ineffective. So it's not just a leadership question, right? It's probably a deeper question around, like you said, culture, and I think, and values and all of that, which again comes back probably to the leader building that kind of culture in the organization where.
Precisely. See, it is a time of shift. Now we hear of the empathetic CEO, right? Before we didn't hear these things. So
before we said powerful CEO.
Yeah. Now mass consciousness is changing. We are now putting more stress on the so-called feminine qualities, the receptive qualities. A leader has to listen. A leader has to be open. A leader is not going to be out there and say my way or the highway. A leader has to take everybody into consideration. So that shift is slowly happening. And education systems will also change. It comes right from there, where you were caned if you misbehaved in class, you know, or punished. Now that's not allowed. So there is a definite cultural change. So new age leaders, shall we say, going forward, are more comrades than leader. And it is a group effort which is taking an organization forward rather than one person.
Right.
So going forward, I mean, maybe in the next 5 to 10 years, Dev, what do you see is as the main qualities which one should have as a leader, or which one, if they didn't have it already, they have to work on it to be successful and lead their organizations to success?
Yeah. Let's just break this down into 3 or 4 dimensions, right? I think before we talk about the style of leadership and we talk about the some of the stuff that we discussed, which are more individual traits, I think, vision in an organization is very important, right? Where are we going? Why? I think the why of a company is very, very, I think, important. Why do we do this, right? Udmi talked about a shift in culture. And what that shift has also done, I fully agree with that. I can see that in my own children, and millennials who come to work, they are far more aligned to an ideology than 20 years back people were, right? 20 years back, I think in my generation, when people started to work, it was more about their career growth and their achievement. And they were almost wanting to run away from the past and write a different kind of story and produce an identity for themselves, which was very different from what they grew up watching, right? So I think we were driven a lot by that sense of almost undoing the wrongs of the past in a way, right? And pushing for a higher level of achievement and sense. But today, I think other things are there, right? I think there is an idea of the environment, I think, has become a big part of our thinking. values of how we treat people, and color and race, and all that has become very important for millennials, which wasn't so much back then. uh, so just to say that I'm a commercial organization whose purpose is to be commercially successful and make a lot of money, I think is not an inspiring why anymore for a lot of people who are entering the workplace, right? Neither is the idea that we are here to run a social service organization, right? Because not everyone can do social service. People want to have careers, they want to be successful, they want to make money, right? So the union of these two things, right, lands us in a space where organizations have to articulate that their commerce will be through doing something good in the world. Not that the good is a constraint to the work that they do and they will minimize their impact or minimize their damage, but it has to be through the commerce we produce something valuable to the world, right? Not just solve the problems of the world, but also contribute in a positive way. And I'm not just saying this in the narrow sense of sustainability or in the sense of environment. Of course, they are there. But I think people get meaning from deeper things, like, are we creating IP in the world, right? Are we creating some intellectual, energy? All of those things, I think. And therefore, today, I think more than ever before, and this word vision is also probably not enough to encapsulate the idea that I'm talking about. I think purpose and vision together, right? It is far more important. And purpose cannot be, it cannot be shallow. It cannot be just like the mission and vision statements that we used to have before. It's got to be something that, people who listen to that and say, I want to work in this company. I want to show up to work because I believe in what they are doing, right? And through that, I will grow and I will make money and this thing. But I think so that will become much, much more important in the next 20 years, in my view, than it was in the last 20 years, especially because that is a job of the leader. And I think a sort of ability to straddle commercial and purpose, and an ability to see them not as different spaces, but to be able to see that there is a continuum in between them and the two are related to each other. And that, I think, that intellectual capacity to see business like that. And it's the softer side of the business. It's the true, pure part of what we do. I think the ability to see that, cleave that, make that count, make your business more differentiated and sharper, as opposed to a business that does everything, chases every opportunity. So I think some of that will come from that type of thinking. What that will probably lead to is an eye for excellence, an eye for quality, an eye for being able to produce all that. So I think, yeah, on the business side, I think that's going to be the most attractive type of leader, in my view. I must say, in humility, who am I to say, what the shape of leadership is going to be? But, that's at least, what my synthesization has been. And on the internal side, I think some of the stuff that we talked about, maybe Urmi can, add a little bit more about what on the internal side will be required. If she agrees that that's the leadership we need to produce in the future, then what is some of the internal, I think, qualities that they must have? I think maybe you should ask Urmi rather than me.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think they've made a very valuable point that the ability to make money and to have meaning and purpose and goal, that needs to be meshed. Because people are demanding far more than just money. Money these days is a given. I mean, if you have a job or a good job, everyone expects to have the right kind of livelihood. But the companies that will win is when they are offering the employee something more than just money. That's not enough. So the more fine-tuned a company's vision statement shall we say, the more exciting it is. In what way exciting? It has to be able to trigger in a person a wanting to expand, a wanting to grow in that direction. Because without passion, nothing is possible. And a leader has to exhibit that passion. A leader has to exhibit that discipline which is required to fuel that passion. But that is what will inspire people. And moving forward, if you would go quite a bit into the future, I believe that human beings are moving away from the mere material stuff towards something higher, which calls to something higher in them. So leaders of tomorrow will be more leaders who are in service of humanity, in service of the organization. They are actually servants. They are the ones who will take the brickbats. They are the ones who will do the dirty work, will be willing to go into the dirt of the entire thing, give it some meaning, give it some shape. So an attitude of service and an attitude of building others, building other leaders, that is what is going to take organizations very far.
Interesting. That thought of leader as serving, I mean, leadership as service.
Yes, leadership as service.
Yeah.
Right?
Any thoughts on that? Your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, not to disagree with what Urmi is saying, but just to sort of slightly challenging view on that. I think to make it so much about service should not start to question the sustainability, commercial sustainability of the organization, which is why I sort of always like to think of the intersection between commerce and service rather than the two of them separately. What we do must automatically lead to commercial success, not because we are coming at it from a sense of just service or commerce, because that's what we do, right? There's a brand that I came across recently that is using plastic to make shoes. Very expensive, very high end, right? Are they doing service or is it commerce? Just to see it in that polarity, to me, is a little confusing. And I like to I'm looking for a new word that, obviously there is some good that is happening, obviously, and therefore it is sustainable, but it also is great commerce. It makes great sense for those shoes should sell because people like you and me will say, hey, I want to wear that shoe instead of the other shoe in the mall, which is, but if I was to come at it only from a service background, from a service mindset, will I lose the commercial astuteness that will make this sustainable and take more plastic out of the street? So just a little sort of maybe a challenging question for Urmi.
Yeah, no, so Dev, by service, what I meant was that if I am a leader, I am in service to the people who are working under me.
For me.
I say. My job is to see that this person reaches his or her highest potential. I am in service to the people who look up to me as a leader. See, so that is not, and I am in service in the sense I work to bring about that person's highest potential so that person can make the most of himself or herself and earn the maximum amount of money. That is the kind of service I mean. And of course, ultimately, what am I doing? If we go broader and broader, I am helping people to transform or to grow. Service in that sense, where I am not simply looking at what I'm getting out of it okay, by this age, I'm going to retire. I have to make so much money. I don't care who I leave behind. I don't care what happens to the company. I'm just looking, I'll do a perfectly good job. But my attitude is different. I will simply look out for myself, get my money and get out.
Yeah.
But
I agree with you. I agree with that. I agree with that. But how do you, I mean, there's a dimension to it. Of course, being servile almost is a leadership quality. I agree, even more than service, because I am available to you as a resource. My job is to support you. My job is to provide you the environment and ecosystem to be successful. I understand, but there will be people who will still not be successful, right? There will be people who, despite best efforts, will maybe not have the right attitude or may not have the right alignment to the purpose that we are working on.
Absolutely.
And you will have to change people also as a leader.
100%.
You can't.
No, as a leader, there is a vision. Anything that is not serving that vision has to leave. Has to be encouraged as much as possible. But a leader cannot compromise the vision, where we are going, why we are going, cannot be distracted by people who are not being able to align to that. That is a given. That is also part of service to the organization. That I will rise above all this. My main job is to take that group of people, that organization, towards the said vision or the goal, which again must have meaning in the overall global context. What am I doing here, right?
Yeah.
So, that is the leader's job, to rise above it and to keep that in mind, and at the same time be the baseline for everybody. It's a tough job.
That's why they get paid more than everybody else.
Yes.
Because it's a tough job. That's why they get paid.
They get paid more. But that comes with a lot of work, right?
So would you say a leader like this, Urmi, is the superconscious leader? Because that is the term you very often use in your talks. So how would you, in a nutshell, in few words, describe a superconscious leader?
Yeah. So it reminds me of the Steve Jobs story. At his funeral, everyone was given a brown paper packet when people were going out. And that brown paper packet carried my favorite book on my bookshelf, which is Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramhansa Yogananda. Now, this book is a magical book. It talks about energy. A superconscious leader understands energetic realities, which is below the surface, not only material reality. Okay, so what do I mean by energetic reality? That connection to source. A leader who is able to be in flow because of the connection to the self, and who is able to perceive things which, say, normal people do not. If we are going to be superconscious leaders, we have to really have the sixth sense. And if you want to understand what is the sixth sense, this is actually one of the earliest business manuals, which later on, of course, we have how to do books and all those things, but this is the real spiritual classic. And I think all leaders should read it, and they will be inspired. So perceiving energetic realities, being able to be in flow, which means I am connected to source, to a certain higher consciousness, which is above the normal everyday consciousness, which means that I am connected to my intuition. So that would really make an inspirational, a visionary leader. Someone who is able to look beyond the surface of things and go beyond it to understand a different reality. And if we really study it, there are ways to go about it, of course. How do we understand energetic realities? There are many, many methods. There are psychological methods, there are spiritual tools to move towards that. But yeah, according to me, that would make a superconscious leader, a leader who has very high energy, who is connected to intuition, who is connected to source, who is in the flow, who is aligned, shall we say, with their own soul qualities and connected to source. It is to go beyond the physical, deeper inside you.
Would you say, Urmi, like you are coming from that perspective, and Dev came from a perspective that leader of the future would need to combine commerce with purpose. So would you say a super conscious leader like the one you described, who can understand energetic realities and be connected to the source, that kind of a leader will be able to bring about this enmeshment of purpose and commerce?
Yeah. 100%, because that kind of a leader understands money is also an energy. So they would find it very, very easy to make money. They don't come with the baggage that money is the root of all evil, and money, there are many, many beliefs about money, many, many beliefs about success also. A superconscious leader would break those beliefs, because the superconscious leader has an abundant mindset. For him or her, money is just energy. It will flow. If you do work with passion, and if you are connected to source, money is a side effect. That is a given. So just fighting for money is not going to do it. Moving towards who you really are as a person is going to do it.
Any closing thoughts on that, Dev, and then we'll wind up?
See, sometimes when you're writing an examination and you get a question that is out of syllabus for you, the best is to not try to answer that question, right? So I must leave it at that, I think, from my side, because I think this is a subject I don't deeply understand what Urmi talked about, but it's
but you do it anyway. Dave, you are doing it unconsciously. I'll just have to make you see it consciously.
See it consciously. Yeah, I don't fully. I mean, I was fascinated by the last 3-4 minutes of what Urmi was talking about. The first thing I will go and do is to look for the book if it's in my library. If not, I'll buy it or swing by to Urmi's and pick up a copy or whatever and read it to start. I think that would be my closing thought. And it's very interesting if we can mesh all of this together in a model, almost in a leadership model, which is to say that, what is the internal, I think, enabler for people to be able to see and articulate purpose, right? I think if we can sort of, I'm very curious to get deeper in this subject. And thank you, Urmi, for making that connection between purpose and connection almost that you are making.
Yeah, Dev, that is exactly what we are doing with our new program, Success Dharma. Exactly this, how to connect commerce with who you really are and your vision and what it takes, how we have to transform as people to move towards this superconscious leadership.
Look forward to that.
So great. Wonderful. It was an amazing talk, amazing start of the day. Thank you, both of you, Dev and Urmi. And we'll have more such talks, and we will definitely like to invite you for more such talks, Dev. And for now, thank you, and we'll close it for now. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks, Urmi. Thanks a lot. Have a nice day.